We were told that being good is enough. From the earliest days, whispered through bedtime stories and righteous sermons, we were taught that if we just remain kind, if we keep our intentions pure, if we refuse to harm, then the world will somehow align itself to reward us. It's a beautiful illusion, one so carefully crafted, so sweetly spoken, that most never dare to question it. But if we look closer, if we dare to stare through the comforting veil, we find something far more unsettling. Goodness has a cost. Not the cost of effort, not the cost of sacrifice, but a cost that carves itself into the soul of the unsuspecting. This is the cost Machiavelli warned about, and this is the cost the Stoics silently endured. Because the world is not a monastery, it is an arena, and in this arena, goodness alone does not guarantee survival. In fact, for those who do not understand its price, goodness often becomes the very reason they are broken. The first illusion, that goodness is self-sustaining. We love to believe that good intentions are enough, that the purity of our heart will somehow ripple through the chaos of human affairs and return to us untouched, uncorrupted. But intentions, however noble, cannot shield us from reality. They do not bend the laws of power. They do not soften the instincts of predators. They do not rewrite the selfish calculus of the human mind. Goodness is like light in a storm. It can guide, it can inspire, but it can also draw moths and wolves alike. Many of us carry this light openly, proudly. We give, we forgive, we offer. And for a time, it feels righteous, it feels meaningful. But then, the world begins to respond. Not with the gratitude we imagined, but with exploitation, with suspicion, with cruelty dressed as opportunity. Because when you are good without wisdom, you become predictable. And when you are predictable, you become controllable. Machiavelli's mirror. Machiavelli once wrote, "A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must inevitably come to grief among so many who are not." His words are not cynicism, they are observation. He saw through the illusions that comfort most men. He saw that in courts, in palaces, in marketplaces, and even in families, the good man who is naive is not admired. He is used. He is tolerated as long as his goodness is convenient. He is praised as long as he serves a purpose. And when his usefulness ends, he is discarded with the same cold efficiency used against enemies. It is not because goodness is wrong. It is because the world is ruled not by ideals, but by human nature. And human nature, for all its capacity for love, has an even greater capacity for self-interest. Machiavelli's realism shocks us because it strips away the moral poetry we wrap around reality. It does not flatter us. It forces us to look into a mirror we would rather avoid. A mirror that shows us that the cost of goodness is often paid in betrayal, disillusionment, and silence. The Stoics' response. But here lies the divergence. Where most grow bitter when they discover this cost, the Stoic grows wiser. He does not abandon goodness. He refines it. He does not reject kindness. He tempers it with strength. He does not let betrayal harden his heart. He lets it sharpen his understanding. The Stoic understands that the external world cannot be controlled, that the reactions of others cannot be dictated, but what can be mastered is the self. So when goodness meets betrayal, the Stoic does not collapse in sorrow, nor rise in fury. He stands firm, observing both his pain and his pride.
He does not let destructive emotions guide his next step. For the cost of goodness is not just paid to others, it is also paid within. And it is within that the true battle begins. The hook, the unseen cost. This is the part nobody tells you. The shocking cost of goodness is not only what the world extracts from you, it is what goodness demands of your inner strength. Because to remain good in a cruel world requires more than purity. It requires discipline. It requires detachment. It requires a kind of strength that goes beyond emotion and steps into the realm of clarity. To be good, truly good, in a Machiavellian world, you must carry the softness of compassion in one hand and the steel of self-control in the other. If you fail to hold both, you will be devoured. If you succeed, you will become something rarer than power itself, untouchable. Not because you control the world, but because you control yourself. And that is where the path begins.
Part 1. The brutal reality. Why the world punishes the naively good. Let us strip away the comforting myths for a moment. Let us stand not in the sanctuary of idealism, but in the cold air of reality. Because if we truly wish to understand the shocking cost of goodness, we must first understand the world that demands this cost. The world is not kind, it is calculating. Machiavelli never wrote to glorify cruelty. He wrote to describe the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. His words were not an invitation to become ruthless, but a warning to those who wander into the political jungle wearing the robes of innocence. He saw what most refuse to see, that the world is a theater of interests where every player is moved not by moral poetry, but by their own desires, fears, and survival instincts. Look closely, and you'll see it. Behind every alliance, there is calculation. Behind every compliment, there is strategy. Behind every betrayal, there was once a silent opportunity that someone seized. It's not always malicious. It's often just human. People act in ways that secure their advantage. They protect their image, their power, their comfort. And when a good person enters this theater unarmed, guided only by purity and trust, they do not encounter kindness in return. They encounter tests. The naive good are tested first. The world has a strange way of testing the good, not with kindness, but with temptation and exploitation. It wants to see how far it can go. Give a man who is known to be generous a small request, and it will soon grow into an expectation. Show mercy once, and watch how quickly others line up to benefit from your softness. Forgive repeatedly, and you'll find the same offenders returning, smiling. Why? Because goodness without boundaries looks like weakness to those who measure worth through dominance. Naive goodness is like leaving the doors of your house open, believing that honesty alone will keep thieves away. But honesty does not stop hunger, and purity does not deter ambition. Machiavelli understood this instinct. He observed that people in general are quicker to exploit than to reciprocate, quicker to test limits than to respect them. And so the good, if they are unprepared, become the first sacrificial lambs on the altar of reality. The predator and the prey. It may sound dark, but the world often resembles an ecosystem more than a utopia. In nature, the gazelle is not punished for its gentleness. It is simply caught because it was slow to recognize the lion. Human society has refined this process, but it has not escaped it. Predators exist, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle ones, the opportunist, the manipulator, the envious friend, the calculating superior,
the charming liar. They feed not on flesh, but on trust, energy, time, reputation. They observe, they measure, they wait. And when they meet someone who is visibly good, kind to a fault, trusting without caution, unwilling to confront, they see a path of least resistance. The shocking cost of goodness is that in a world of predators, it paints a target on your back before you even realize you're in danger. Machiavelli's warning: fear versus love. One of Machiavelli's most misunderstood teachings comes from his famous question, is it better to be loved than feared, or feared than loved? He answered, it is much safer to be feared than loved if one has to lack one of the two. He did not say this to advocate cruelty. He said it to expose the vulnerability of relying solely on love. Love is fickle. It fades when interests change. Fear, when wisely controlled, creates stability because it sets boundaries. Machiavelli saw that rulers who relied purely on love often fell when affection shifted. But those who commanded respect through strength, clarity, and a touch of healthy fear were less likely to be betrayed. Translate this into the life of a good person. If your goodness relies entirely on people loving you, you are vulnerable. But if your goodness is supported by clear self-respect and boundaries, people will think twice before taking advantage of you. The Stoic understands this too, but approaches it differently. While Machiavelli focused on the external mechanisms of power, Stoicism turns inward. It asks, do you control your impulses, or do they control you? Because if you cannot master yourself, the world will gladly master you. The Stoic's shield, inner fortress. In this brutal reality, the Stoic does not abandon goodness. He builds an inner fortress around it. He knows that the external world cannot be trusted to reward purity, but he also knows that virtue once corrupted by bitterness ceases to be virtue. So he adopts a different approach. He practices self-control as a shield, not to hide, but to remain unmoved. He observes human behavior without resentment. He expects betrayal without growing paranoid. He gives kindness, but never at the cost of self-respect. This is why true Stoic goodness is terrifyingly strong. It is not naive. It does not beg for reciprocation. It does not collapse when confronted by cruelty. It stands calm and aware like a mountain in a storm. The world can throw its winds, its deception, its calculations, and still the Stoic remains, because his goodness does not depend on the world's response. It depends on his discipline. The hidden punishment of the good. The world punishes the naive good in subtle ways. It drains their time with endless demands. It steals their energy by making them fix what others break. It twists their intentions into obligations. It hands them guilt when they finally say no. And when they are exhausted, it labels them ungrateful for daring to protect themselves. This is why many kind souls burn out. They think something is wrong with their goodness, but the truth is, they were never taught how to defend it. They confuse being good with being blind. They confuse patience with self-neglect. They confuse forgiveness with permission. The Stoic knows better. Goodness is a choice, not a leash. Mercy is powerful, but only when combined with judgment. Forgiveness is noble, but only when it does not reward harm. Without self-mastery, goodness becomes a tool in the hands of the cunning. With self-mastery, goodness becomes an unshakable force.
A quiet realization. There comes a moment, often in the middle of some personal betrayal, or quiet heartbreak, when a good person sees reality for what it is. And in that silence, a choice is born: to become bitter and abandon goodness altogether, or to become wise and rebuild it with iron underneath. This is where the path divides. The bitter lose their light. The wise temper their light with clarity. And this is where Stoicism and Machiavellian realism unexpectedly meet, not in cruelty, but in lucid awareness. The Stoic does not hate the world for its nature. He understands it. He adjusts, and then he acts, not as a victim, not as a fool, but as a clear-eyed participant in the great theater of human behavior. Part 2. The Inner Battlefield, when emotions turn against goodness. The cost of goodness is not paid only in the outside world. The crueler cost is often paid within, in the quiet chambers of our own minds. Because once the world tests us, once betrayal, exploitation, or disappointment sets its teeth in us, the real enemy awakens: our destructive emotions. They are the invisible assassins of virtue. They can twist a noble soul into something unrecognizable. And if left unchecked, they do not just break our goodness, they corrupt it. The first strike: bitterness. Bitterness is the first to arrive. It creeps in slowly, often disguised as clarity. We begin by saying, "I've learned my lesson. I'll never trust anyone again." It sounds wise. It feels powerful. But beneath those words, something darker takes root. Bitterness is not wisdom. It is pain pretending to be philosophy. It feeds on memories of betrayal. It repeats old scenes in the mind like a cruel theater on endless loop. It convinces us that everyone is the same, that kindness is foolish, that closing our hearts is protection. But Stoicism teaches us to see this clearly. Bitterness is not a shield. It is a cage. It doesn't keep danger out. It keeps us locked in. The Stoic watches bitterness rise and says, "Here you are, but you are not me." He observes. He does not obey. He refuses to let pain rewrite his principles. Because once bitterness rules, goodness turns cold, transactional, hollow, and the light that once inspired becomes a dim, defensive flicker. The second strike: anger. Anger arrives differently. It doesn't creep, it erupts. When the good are wronged, their anger is often sharp and righteous. They burn with the feeling that justice has been mocked, that their openness has been exploited. It is a natural response, but if not mastered, it becomes a self-consuming fire. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." The Stoics understood that anger disorients the soul. It blinds judgment. It makes us act like the very people we resent. And here lies the danger. Many good people, after being wronged, swing violently to the other extreme. They decide, if kindness brings pain, then cruelty will protect me. They abandon virtue, not because they stopped believing in it, but because anger convinced them that it was a losing game. This is how noble hearts are lost, not by betrayal alone, but by their own furious response to betrayal. The Stoic does not suppress anger by pretending it isn't there.
He acknowledges it, studies it, isolates its cause, and then chooses not to become its servant. He knows that anger is like picking up a hot coal to throw at someone else. You burn yourself first. To remain good in the face of injustice is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. The third strike, despair. When betrayal cuts deep, when goodness seems to bring only suffering, many fall into despair. This is the quietest, most dangerous of the three. Despair whispers, "What's the point?" It does not rage. It sinks. It convinces us that the world is too cruel, that no action matters, that virtue is wasted breath in an indifferent universe. It turns noble ambition into quiet apathy. But the Stoic knows that despair is a trick of the mind. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." The world's cruelty cannot force despair into us. Despair arises when we expect the world to reward us for our virtue, and it doesn't. Goodness is not meant to be a transaction. It is a stance. It is a chosen posture of the soul, regardless of applause or outcome. The Stoic rises each day not because the world promises kindness, but because his inner code remains unshaken. He does good because it is his nature, not because it guarantees a return. This inner battle is rarely seen by others. To the world, the good person seems calm, perhaps distant, but inside there is often a storm, bitter memories clashing with old ideals, anger roaring for retaliation, despair whispering that nothing matters. Most people lose this battle not because they are weak, but because they never learned to observe their own minds. They confuse themselves with their emotions. The Stoic does something radical. He creates a distance between stimulus and response. He watches his emotions as if standing on the shore, watching waves crash. He says, "This bitterness is rising. This anger is loud. This despair is creeping in." And then he waits. He doesn't act immediately. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't sink. He lets the wave rise and fall. Because he knows that emotions are temporary visitors. They are not the ruler of the house.
Self-control, the sword and the shield. To overcome destructive emotions is not to become emotionless, it is to become their master. Self-control is both the sword and the shield of the Stoic. It cuts through illusion and it protects against inner collapse. When bitterness whispers lies, self-control keeps the door closed. When anger erupts, self-control holds the reins. When despair tries to poison hope, self-control lights the inner lamp. This is not easy. It is daily warfare. But this warfare is the cost of greatness and the true cost of goodness. Anyone can be good when the world applauds, but to remain good when the world strikes you, tempts you, or ignores you, that is the path of the strong. The Stoics walked this path not because it was comfortable, but because it was the only path that led to freedom from inner chaos. Why this battle matters. If we lose this inner war, our goodness becomes a wound. It festers, infects, and eventually turns us into the very thing we once despised. If we win, our goodness becomes an unshakable force, not naive, not brittle, but forged in fire. It becomes something the world can neither exploit nor destroy. And this is the shocking truth. The cost of goodness is not measured by what others take from you, but by what you must conquer inside yourself to keep your light burning in a world of storms. Part 3. The transformation. Becoming good without being weak. There comes a moment in every person's journey where innocence ends and clarity begins. When the world has tested you, when your heart has bled from betrayal, when your emotions have tried to drag you into darkness, there is a decisive turning point. It is here that most people choose between two extremes. They abandon goodness to protect themselves, or they cling to naivete, hoping the world will change. Both paths lead to ruin. The Stoic chooses a third way, a way of transformation, a way where goodness is no longer naive but armored, where kindness flows but from a place of strength, not desperation, where compassion is chosen, not manipulated. This is the Stoic's quiet revolution to become good without being weak. 1. Shedding the naive armor. Before transformation begins, something must die. The illusion. The illusion that being good will shield us from cruelty. The illusion that intentions alone can bend reality. The illusion that the world will mirror our kindness. These illusions are comforting, but they are fragile. They shatter the first time life strikes with real force. And when they shatter, many lose themselves. But the Stoic deliberately breaks them before the world does. He looks at human nature without romanticism, without rage. He sees that people are a mixture of light and shadow, that goodness is not universal, and that expecting fairness from the world is like expecting fire not to burn. By shedding illusions, he sheds weakness. By seeing reality as it is, he gains clarity. For you cannot transform if you are still protecting lies. 2. Building the inner citadel. Once illusions fall, the Stoic begins to build, not walls against the world, but a fortress within. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, a mental stronghold that cannot be invaded by external chaos. Here, in this fortress, the Stoic sets his principles like unmovable stones. To act with virtue, regardless of reward. To master impulses, regardless of provocation. To stay calm, regardless of storms. To remain kind, but never blind. This citadel is not built overnight. It is built through daily discipline, repeated reflection, and deliberate choice. Each time the world tests him and he refuses to let emotions rule, another stone is placed. Each betrayal endured with clarity, another wall rises. And each act of disciplined goodness, another gate is secured. And slowly, the good person becomes untouchable. Not because the world has grown kinder, but because their center cannot be shaken. 3. Detaching goodness from approval. One of the greatest transformations is this. The Stoic learns to detach goodness from the need for external validation. Most people are good because they want to be liked. They seek applause, appreciation, moral recognition. But when approval fades, their goodness fades with it. The Stoic does not play this game. He acts from principle, not from the shifting winds of human opinion. This is why his goodness is terrifying to manipulators. You cannot bribe him with praise. You cannot control him with guilt. He gives kindness freely, but never sells his soul for acceptance. Goodness that depends on approval is fragile. Goodness rooted in principle is immovable.
4. Setting boundaries without losing compassion. Many fear that if they set boundaries, they will stop being good. They believe that to say no is to become harsh, that to protect themselves is selfish. This is a lie that keeps many kind souls enslaved. The Stoic understands that boundaries are not walls against love, they are walls against exploitation. To set boundaries is not to stop giving, it is to give wisely.
To say no is not cruelty, it is clarity. To withdraw from manipulation is not indifference, it is self-respect. True compassion has structure. It is not blind generosity, it is directed strength. The Stoic can look into the eyes of someone trying to exploit his goodness and smile calmly, not with resentment, but with silent certainty. He helps, but never at the cost of his inner fortress. He forgives, but never forgets the lesson. He gives, but never becomes a slave to the taking. 5. Quiet power versus loud virtue signaling. In this transformation, goodness changes form. It becomes quiet power, not loud virtue signaling. The world is full of people who proclaim their goodness loudly, demanding recognition for every act. They turn kindness into a performance, virtue into currency. But quiet power doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't shout. It simply acts, consistently, steadily, with unshakable strength. This is the kind of goodness that unnerves manipulators, inspires the noble, and confuses the cruel. Because it cannot be provoked, cannot be bought, and cannot be broken. Quiet power is not passive, it is collected intensity, focused through discipline. It walks through the world like a storm in silence, radiating presence without demanding attention. 6. Embracing strategic goodness. Here is where Machiavelli and Stoicism unexpectedly meet: strategy. Machiavelli taught that a ruler must learn not only how to do good, but not how to do good when circumstances demand. He wasn't glorifying evil, he was warning against blind virtue in a dangerous world. The Stoic understands this too. He knows that being good does not mean being naive. Sometimes silence is wiser than generosity. Sometimes restraint is kinder than indulgence. Sometimes strategic distance protects goodness better than reckless involvement. Strategic goodness is not manipulation, it is wisdom and action. It's knowing when to give, when to hold back, and when to walk away, all while staying true to one's inner principles. This is what true strength looks like, not reacting emotionally, but responding consciously. 7. The rebirth of the good soul. When all these layers merge, clarity, self-control, boundaries, quiet power, strategic wisdom, a new kind of goodness is born. No longer the fragile light that flickers at the world's cruelty, no longer the naive giver that burns out from endless taking, no longer the emotional heart that breaks at every betrayal. This new goodness is tempered like steel, soft to the touch, but impossible to break, compassionate, yet unmanipulable, kind, yet fiercely self-respecting. This is the Stoic transformation, not the death of goodness, but its ascension. Why this transformation is rare? Most people never reach this stage, because transformation requires pain. It demands that we face reality without flinching, that we abandon comforting illusions, that we fight our own emotions and rebuild from the ashes of disappointment. It's easier to grow bitter. It's easier to withdraw. It's easier to pretend. But for those who choose this harder path, something extraordinary happens. They become immovable forces in a fragile world. Their presence alone shifts the atmosphere. Their quiet strength becomes a mirror in which others confront their own weakness. They are neither victims nor predators. They are masters of themselves. The cost paid, the power gained. The shocking cost of goodness is real. It is paid in betrayal, in disillusionment, in lonely nights of reflection. It is paid in the tears shed when illusions die and when the heart learns to stand on its own. But what is gained is immeasurable: unbreakable character, inner peace amidst chaos, freedom from emotional slavery, the ability to love without being destroyed, the power to do good not as a plea, but as a choice. This is the kind of goodness Machiavelli warned the naive about, and the kind the Stoics
quietly built within themselves. Let us conclude with clarity, not comfort. Goodness, when stripped of illusions, reveals its price: isolation, betrayal, misunderstanding, and the silent battles within the soul. But this cost is not a curse, it is the crucible in which strength is forged. The world may mock virtue, exploit kindness, and reward cunning over sincerity, but none of that can touch the fortress built within a disciplined mind. We do not strive to be good because it is easy. We strive to be good because it is right. Because in a world that bends to power, standing firm in principle makes us unshakable. Machiavelli exposed the world's nature. Stoicism teaches us how to walk through it, calm, clear, untouchable. Let others trade integrity for comfort. We will pay the price of goodness and rise above it.